Welcome to A More Beautiful World podcast with Susan Renee, a place for those of us with the desire to expand our consciousness, tap into higher vibrations of love, and to connect into a community where together we can make the world a more beautiful place. I'm so eager to share with you what I've learned on my journey in discovering how we're all connected and how what we do for one, we do for us all. Here, I'll be sharing my own experiences, knowledge, and expertise for how you can heal, transform, and ascend your being so that together we can create the more beautiful world we all know is possible. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of A More Beautiful World. In today's episode, we're going to talk about how to open up to receiving and really how to open up to receiving for your healing. In this episode, I really want to talk through several things. But so many of you have gone through trauma and been in dysfunctional environments in your upbringing. And this has shut down your ability to fully and genuinely receive. Fortunately, today I'm going to help you understand why you shut down your receiving abilities and also how to open them back up so you can receive all that you desire as you heal and transform your life. I'll also be sharing today how giving and receiving are related and how opening to receive can enhance your ability to give as well. So if you are ready to learn how to allow yourself to receive more fully and to learn how this applies to your anxiety and trauma healing, then this episode is for you. Okay, so let's start with a few little questions to build some self-awareness as we drop into this episode. So I'd love for you to, answer the questions, right? How well do you receive? Do you feel you are balanced in your giving and your receiving? And do you feel that you desire to receive more in your life, but maybe you weren't sure how to allow it in? When it comes to receiving, it can be challenging, especially for those of us with anxiety and with the trauma in our history. I know opening up to receive and allow in blessings, allow in abundance, right? Allowing all of these beautiful things in the world, it really has been one of my biggest growth edges over the last year, but it's been very front and center this year for me. And which is why I wanted to talk to you about what I'm learning in this space and what I've been, working with clients on and how we can all do this better. Because opening up to receiving is part of your anxiety and trauma healing. And it is a very useful practice on your healing and transformation journey when you begin to work on it. So I know on the surface, maybe this sounds a little simple, but I can tell you it's not. And we're going to dig into that in this episode. And it really is quite unbelievable how many of you out there, like myself, struggle with receiving, and struggle with allowing blessings to flow into your life. This can really be the receiving of anything. And some of us maybe struggle in some categories more than others, but this could be receiving love. It could be receiving money, receiving, new experiences, receiving different people, receiving a loving partnership, right? Receiving gifts from others. All of this receiving, it is one and the same because allowing is allowing. Receiving is receiving. So regardless of how big or how small the desires, it all comes from the same ability of having this openness to receive. And again, your openness, it doesn't depend on the size of your desire. We're usually either open to it or closed off from it, at least closed off fully from it. So what is really happening here? right? When we think about like, okay, grew up in some dysfunctional family situation. I've had and experienced some trauma. I have anxiety. I can see, right, that maybe I'm not fully receiving and allowing blessings into my life. But what is happening there, right? Why have we put up blocks and prevented ourselves from allowing the receiving to come in, allowing the blessings to flow in? What is the root cause here? So before we dive in this episode and talk about how to receive, I think a big key component, which we're going to spend a good amount of this podcast on, is knowing why we aren't open to receiving. And there are two main reasons that we have closed off to receiving. And I resonate with this myself, and I've also seen it with my clients. So the two reasons are it's either because A, we feel unsafe and have a history of feeling unsafe, or two, we don't feel worthy. And we've spent our lives not feeling our worth, feeling a lack of self-worth. And those two issues, feeling unsafe, not feeling worthy, those have put up those blocks, those barriers for us to not being able to receive fully. So it really is when you begin to feel safe and worthy in this world that you'll also naturally know how to receive gracefully. So I want to break down these two reasons of why we're not receiving, right? Why we're not open to receiving, because I think they're really important in order to expand your awareness and deepen really this understanding of yourself, right? Because the more you have expanded your awareness, the more you know yourself, you can really start to integrate the practices here that I'll be sharing and open up, right? Open yourself up to receiving, which means you're going to start opening yourself up to more healing as well. So let's talk about number one, reason why number one, you are closed off to receiving, and that is feeling unsafe. So when you come from a history of dysfunction, a history of trauma in your life, you don't feel safe. Right? Let's say there was dysfunction in your immediate family, right, growing up, and really the one place in our lives where we're supposed to feel safe, is with our families, right, with our tribe, right, with our parents, with our caretakers. And if you didn't have that growing up, you could have some deep-seated root causes, right, of feeling unsafe because the one place in the world you were supposed to have it, you didn't. So your experiences taught you that this is an unsafe world. And what happens when you grow up with that and you have that belief system grow within you, then you start to not feel safe anywhere, right? And it leads to a lack of trust in others. It leads to you not trusting in the world. And it really that lack of trust, when we feel unsafe, and then we stop trusting, we stop ultimately, we stop trusting so much in our experiences and others. But without that trust, then we shift into this need to control everything in our lives. And so maybe, maybe that part of it resonates with you. Maybe you can see where the symptoms are now for you. Because this is why many of us turn into giving, chronically instead of receiving, because when we are giving, we are in control. You are in control of your giving. You get to control what you give, where you give, how you give, when you give it. You are in control. And again, that need for control comes from feeling unsafe, not being able to trust, and therefore needing to control. Right? So receiving is the opposite of that, right? And that's where it can be a little difficult for us to receive because we have to be able to trust the giver And we have to trust their what, their where, their how, their when in their giving, right? And we have to kind of loosen our grip of control, and really allow our hearts to open. And again, we have to trust the giver that we are receiving from. So again, as we work on receiving here, know that we are working on feeling safe and trusting. Feeling safe and trusting are a big part of this process. Allowing yourself to work on, letting go of control and loosening your grip on the need to control things all the time. Because feeling more safe and more trusting, are going to be benefits of working on this receiving, right? Because we're naturally, again, going to have to trust our receiver, build that level of safety within ourselves in order to receive. So that is, again, I could probably do a whole podcast episode on the concept of feeling safe, and I probably will. But no, again, I think for this episode, it's important to know that is one of our root causes, right, of not being open to receiving. So feeling unsafe, we want to shift that. We want you to be more trusting. We want you to feel, again, more safe to open up to the receiving. So number 2 of our root cause is feeling unworthy. So again, when you grow up, right, in this trauma, in this dysfunction, you usually aren't receiving the love, the attention, the affection that you need. And what this trains us to do over time is, right, we cultivate these belief systems because we're not receiving it, that we start to believe we don't deserve it, right? We aren't worthy of the love. We aren't worthy of the attention. We aren't worthy of the affection. And that creates this deep-seated belief system of feeling unworthy. Unworthiness can also come from a separation from oneness, a separation from the universe, from God, from yourself, your higher self, whatever you'd like to call it. But again, this is usually a learned response that we get, from our caregivers, from our parents as we grow up. Because many of us have grown up under this story of separation, right? That we are separate from God. And, when you start to maybe peel back some of the layers, right? You start to realize we are in the story of interconnection, the story of interbeing. We are all connected and God is within us and within all of us, right? And we are surrounded by the God energy, the universe, right? The quantum field, again, whatever word you would like to call it. But growing up, if we were separated from that, that also creates feelings of unworthiness, right? Like God is better than me. I have sinned, right? There's so many things we've learned in our religions that have made us this separate, this less worthy, right? So in either case, where the unworthiness could be coming from, be it from the family and the trauma dysfunction, right? Not receiving the love, attention. Maybe it's from separation, and being brought up in the story of separation. Hey, maybe it's both reasons. But in either case, when that happens, you then begin to feel like you have to work to be worthy, right? And that comes from like, I am not good enough. Right? So I'm not worthy of love. I'm not good enough to receive love. So now I have to compensate and do work to become worthy. Right? So in that space, we're always compensating then by doing more, by being more. A lot of perfectionists, come out of this space because we want to be perfect. We want to be seen as perfect because we want to be enough and we want to be worthy of receiving that love, that attention, right? So it gets into this really nasty swirl of like constantly doing more because we feel like we have to work to be worthy. And that just isn't the case. One of the reasons too that, we become givers in this space is we start to give to get the validation, to get the praise, to get that like hit on our worthiness. This is another way that we can become chronic givers, out of the feelings of unworthiness, instead of being able to receive, because we want people to see our worth and we want to be acknowledged for something, right? So this may be, right, you want people to see how successful you are. So you're giving a lot of gifts or giving a lot of money at Christmas time. Maybe you're giving your time and volunteering all the time, not because you truly want to, but because you want other people to be like, oh, you are so wonderful, right? You are so awesome. That's so great that you give that much. And maybe you want that validation or that praise, right? So these two issues are huge, and if you resonated with feeling unsafe, or if you resonated with feeling unworthy, or maybe both, um, or even if you're recognizing right now, how maybe you are a chronic giver and you see some of the reasons in your history why you've become a chronic giver, right? If any of that so far has resonated with you, here is the biggest part I want all of you out there to understand, especially my chronic givers out there. Giving and receiving both come from the heart. Okay? Both giving and receiving are essentially acts of love. So when you close down your heart to receiving, you are also blocking genuine giving. Now, stick with me here because this one was a little hard for me to stomach at first. But when we give from a closed heart, the giving always has an ulterior motive. All right. So again, if we have some deep-seated issues around feeling unsafe, around, feeling unworthy, right? And we haven't cleared those up. So we're either operating out of a need to control, or we're operating with some ulterior motive, right? To get some praise, to get some validation for our giving. So again, if you're giving from a closed heart, an unhealed heart with these deep wounds in you, the giving's going to have that ulterior motive. So, whether you're trying to control or manipulate some sort of outcome again, or, just get some praise and get that hit, on your worthiness, it could be subtle, though, it really is important to recognize that if you're giving from a closed heart, it's really going to stifle your giving. You're not going to be giving freely and fully and genuinely because there's going to be some little ulterior motive there. And so giving and receiving really go hand in hand because we want our hearts to be open for both of them, right? And when we look at the two root issues, right, of not being open to receiving, we can see that it can affect our giving and our ability to give as well. So if you want to give and and receive both in a genuine way without ulterior motives, I think there's some things we can work on, which we're going to get to here shortly. But I know for me personally, one of the reasons I wanted to work on receiving is because I knew not being able to receive was stifling my giving. And I want to give. I want to be of greatest and highest service to this world, to my clients, to my friends, to my family. And in order to do that, I know now I need to fully open to receive, right? Not only does it keep our own energy and balance and in harmony, right? I think that is where we really can maximize our impact, in making this a more beautiful world. So let's talk about a few ways that we can change, and heal, right? These aspects of ourselves, the core wounds, right, of feeling unsafe and feeling unworthy. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about some other practices you can bring in to open to receiving. But when it comes to feeling unsafe, let's talk about that first. To heal that wound, right, you have to nurture your sense of safety. Pretty straightforward. How do we do that? I think a big part of this is reviewing and releasing your past. Maybe bringing in some journaling prompts, asking yourself questions of, where does the lack of safety come from? What happened in your childhood that shut down, your feelings of safety and made you feel unsafe. This is some pretty deep work, especially if you have some deep-seated trauma. So this process may need to be done with a coach like myself or even a therapist. Um, though no, you can make progress yourself through doing some journaling, around this. Um, Again, I think a lot of our feeling, unsafe does come from events that have transpired in our childhood. So reviewing that, releasing that, maybe it's working on some forgiveness, for your caretakers and their upbringing because they were only doing their best. Maybe it's refraining, some limiting beliefs that have come in from your childhood, because of those events. But really rewriting our story is a big part of that. And I have a whole episode on rewriting your story. So that might be a good second one for you to check out after this podcast. But also, I think you really need to work on trusting the universe and surrendering control, right? Because as I shared earlier, when we feel unsafe, we move into not being, in a trusting space, right? We stop trusting the world, we stop trusting even ourselves. Um, and then we get into the space of control where we feel this deep need to control everything. So in reverse, to, flip the script on that, we have to work on trusting the universe and surrendering control. And I think this is where, leaning into your spiritual practice, listening to some of these podcasts and getting in on a session with me, right? But that's where we need to start building this knowing that everything is unfolding perfectly, right? Everything is happening in divine timing. You are so supported by the universe, and the universe wants you to win. The universe wants to deliver all that you desire. Believe me, it really does. We just have to trust that and believe in that. And so, working a little bit on that, you can do that through some mantra, through some meditation, through some journaling, right? But I think knowing and trusting that you are exactly where you need to be right now, knowing that you are supported, knowing that the universe supports you is so huge. So when it comes to feeling unworthy, right, to heal this core wound, you really have to nurture yourself with the sense of worth. And I can tell you, working on this personally and also professionally with clients, I think one of the best ways we can nurture our sense of self worth is by practicing self love. And one of my favorite ways to do that, and one of the ways I've seen most successful, is by building out a self care routine and building out one you can stick to every day. Even if it's for just a couple minutes, doesn't have to be long and crazy, right? But giving yourself love every single day really, really nurtures your sense of self-worth. Because think about it. If you are giving yourself love every day, you are now repatterning your brain and rewiring your brain and your belief systems to know that you are worthy of receiving love. Right. And if you didn't get it from, your parents or your caretakers in childhood, or you didn't receive love from your siblings, or maybe you were in a marriage for a really long time where, your husband or your wife wasn't giving you the love you needed, wherever the lack of love came from that crushed your feelings of, worthiness, right? Now you can give yourself that love every single day. And when you give yourself that love, right, that is going to nourish and grow and nurture your self worth and your sense of worth. So, A beautiful practice for this is to incorporate some mirror work, gazing at yourself in the mirror without judgment, giving yourself some positive affirmations during that time, doing even some visualization meditations of just, loving yourself and seeing yourself receiving love. And there's some guided meditations you can do as well for building self worth, through self love and so much more. I mean, when it comes to self care, and practicing self love, there are like endless ways that we can make it happen. But I think a big part of this on kind of the other side of like doing things for yourself, a big part of your self worth and nurturing your sense of self worth is also setting healthy boundaries. So make sure you are protecting your energy. Make sure you are protecting, the love that you have for yourself by setting boundaries, because that is one of the best ways as well to practice self love and to nurture your sense of self worth. Okay. So again, these are pretty deep and more complex issues, right? The feeling unsafe, it's shifting that to feeling safe, right? Feeling unworthy, shifting that to feeling worthy. They will take time, they will take practice. And because they are deep issues and a bit more complex, make sure if you need support with these, you get on my calendar for a clarity call so we can determine together how you can work on these further. Okay, because these are big root issues for our trauma and our anxiety healing. And honestly, just stay tuned as well for more podcast episodes because I'm going to break both of those things down in future episodes. I just made that decision. Okay, so now I'm hoping you've got a solid grasp on why you may not be receiving and how you can work on some of the root cause issues. But what can we do to just kind of hit it from the other side, right? And start to just, start to slowly open our hearts to receiving, right? And to, just working a little bit more on receiving so we can build more feelings of safety, more feelings of trust, lessen that grip on control a little bit, feel a little more self-worth, right? Let a little more self-love in. I think first, I'm going to give you a little simple assessment to do, to see like, are you open to receiving? And I'm sure you probably have a good grasp on it as we've talked through this podcast. But when it comes to actually the act of receiving, a few little simple barometers for you to ask yourself: do you receive compliments well? Do you receive unexpected gifts easily? Do you accept help when it is offered? And do you accept your meal or coffee being paid for by a friend? Again, I know these may seem small, but I think they give you a great window into whether or not you have open receiving channels, right? And even maybe take one of those examples and think through it. Are there certain emotions that come up when a friend offers to buy you a coffee? Do you feel now that you owe them a cup of coffee? Or, get curious with yourself and see what comes up when you think about these receiving questions. So again, as you're feeling through that, and if you've just recognized through this podcast that you have issues, maybe some issues, some difficulties with receiving, let's talk about how to change that real quick as we wrap up this episode. So know first and foremost that we can open to receiving. If we've been closed off for years and years, for even decades, it is possible to open up. And that shift begins with awareness. So again, one of my goals here in this episode is to really expand your awareness on where you're at, and what opportunities you have to work on. Because once you have that expanded awareness, all you need is the willingness to practice it, right? So if you've got the awareness, you're ready, you're willing, to do some practice and opening to receive, let's talk about how, right, to do it. So a quick note here. Know that any of these things I'm about to share, doing them alongside, or in tandem with working on the safety and worthiness issues is really of utmost importance for your long-term success. So those few little check-in questions I asked you earlier, to see if you are open to receiving, they are also used to learn how to receive in easy ways. So, I asked you earlier, do you receive compliments well? A lot of people don't. So the first thing that I'm going to share with you and how to practice, an opening to receive is to receive the compliments. So many of you out there deflect compliments. It's like, hey, your hair looks really beautiful today. Oh, no, it doesn't. It's just such a mess. Oh, I just woke up with it like this, right? Instead of freaking out and deflecting the compliment, say thank you. Receive that compliment. It's a simple thing, but it's funny how many of us, struggle with that. So start working on that. Okay. Start working on receiving your compliments, right? Starting to get you to trust what people are saying, right? Letting go of control, right? Of some things and opening up, feel that worth come in when you say thank you, right? Yes. Your hair looks gorgeous. Accept that compliment. All right. Another practice for you is instead of trying to like undermine someone for paying, for you, for a meal, for a coffee, again, just accept it and say thank you. One of my friends growing up, her grandma always used to say, never deny food or money when it's offered to you. That's really stuck with me. So, maybe I've not always been super good myself at practicing it, but that's why we're here, right? We're here to help better ourselves and beautify this world. And so, stop undermining people when they're trying to pay for you. Don't try to like shove money in their purse afterwards or like think that you have to immediately turn around and buy them something to pay them back, right? Allow the universe to gift you that coffee, to gift you that meal, to gift you that experience, whatever it may be. And of course, say thank you when it happens, right? Accept it and say thank you. Another practice for you to work on is accept help, accept support when it is being offered. If you are moving, or if you are, working on a big project, maybe you need help brainstorming an idea for your work. If people are offering you that help, that support, instead of shutting them off and saying, no, I don't need help, accept that help. Accept it. And again, when you accept it, say thank you for it as well. So to kind of shift away from some of the questions, because those are a few easier ones, I think, for us to start with. But I think when it comes to really opening up to receiving, we talked about some self-love, and practicing self-love and building in some self-care. I think in that space, giving yourself compliments, right? And working on receiving those fully into your heart can be another beautiful way to, open up your heart, to open yourself up to true and genuine receiving. So think about, especially maybe some ways you might have been hard on yourself, historically. What are some ways you can kind of flip that script around and give yourself compliments, right? Even just giving yourself compliments for, things you accomplished during the day, or, look back a year ago and what you wanted to accomplish and where you're at right now, and give yourself compliments for the work you've achieved, right? But as you do that and as you give that to yourself, make sure you are fully receiving them into your heart, and if that inner critic shows up, just silence them. Tell them, no, we are receiving this compliment because I am awesome and I do really great work and I am a loving, kind, generous person, whatever compliment you may be giving yourself. So again, in tandem with that, I think it's important to make sure you give yourself the time for self-care. When we're practicing self-love, in order to open us up to receiving, making time for self-care is everything. And if we can learn how to receive from ourselves, not only is this going to grow self-love, self-worth, it really does train you and open you up to receive from others. So make sure a practice that you bring in here as you are working on opening to receive is making time for yourself, making time for that self-care. Now, a few quick, deeper practices I'm only going to quick mention here. Um, Make sure that you have created space to receive. Um, on one of my plant medicine ceremonies this year, I realized I had no space to receive any of my desires. And it is important that you have and create space if you are trying to bring in something new. This is really important when we're working on manifestation. But I have an entire episode on how to create space for new beginnings. So if you want more details on how to do that work and that deeper level practice, make sure you check out that episode. I also feel working on rewiring our limiting beliefs is going to be really important. This really gets into those root cause issues on feeling safe, on feeling worthy, and the rewriting of these limiting beliefs and changing our belief systems. It can be very powerful to help us release our past and to create new stories, to create new neural pathways for our worth and for our trust in the universe. Okay. Again, I have a whole story or a whole episode on how to rewrite your story. So a lot of that is around limiting beliefs. So check out that episode if you want to go deeper there. But just to finish here, on opening to receive, a couple little last tips I want to remind you of. First off, if you truly desire something, the universe, remember, is moving through everyone and everything you encounter. So if you truly desire something, the universe is conspiring to deliver you your desires. You just have to make sure that you are open to receiving them. And I also want you to know that you are worthy of compliments. You are worthy of praise. You are worthy of an abundant life in all of its forms, simply because you are you. You are a unique, magnificent, divine being. And just because you are you, that makes you worthy. Okay? Let that in, as you work on allowing yourself to receive. So I want to just recap super quickly here because I know this is a long episode, right? I can tell you there is a lot more to receiving than I initially realized when I was starting to, think about this episode and even getting into recording this episode. But most importantly, I think the big takeaway from this episode is I want you to know why you aren't receiving, right? Because it's that expanded awareness that kicks off our ability to change it. So remember, it's a lack of safety or a lack of self-worth. 99% of the time, it's going to be one or both. So start there, and work on those root issues. Okay. Work on healing those root issues. And remember and know I am here to support you on those because those are a little more complex and they can take some time. So if you want to work on, feeling more safe, feeling more worthy, let me know. But also remember that receiving with an open heart allows us to give freely with an open heart. They go hand in hand. So if you need some motivation, if you've been in this chronic giver mode and you want to keep giving, maybe you want to give more, remember in order to give more, you've got to receive more. And you've got to do both with an open heart. And then, once you've kind of got those things in your awareness, you're working on them, remember to start with some of those small practices in receiving, saying thank you to compliments, letting the friend buy you a cup of coffee, getting help, receiving help from someone. And if you work on those small things, and you work on the root causes of the unworthiness and the feeling unsafe, if you work those in tandem, you'll be opening yourself up to receive all that you desire in no time. And the universe will be delivering it to you. But okay, tribe, thank you for sticking with me on this episode. It's been a longer one, but let's remember that this is all about making the world a more beautiful place. And that begins with you. So because you know this, right? As you better yourself and you move through your healing and your transformation journey, you are working as well to beautify our world. So I hope you found this episode so helpful. I appreciate you being here on the journey with me, and I hope you will begin to open up to receive as you move forward on your journey. And as always, remember, if you need support as you're healing the anxiety, as you're healing the trauma, and as you're opening up to receive, feel free to grab your free clarity call with me below, because I would be honored to guide you on your journey and on your healing and on your transformation. But that is all for today, tribe. Until next time, mwah, much love to you all. Hey, tribe. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this podcast, make sure to like the video below and then click subscribe so you never miss an episode. And remember, I've got lots of free resources available to you to support your healing, transformation, and ascension, so you can help in making this a more beautiful world for us all. Make sure you check them out in the description below. Thanks again for tuning in, tribe. And until next time, much love to you all.